Articulated steam locomotives are not a very common sight in railroads worldwide, although they are sights to behold, as they're basically regular steam locomotives, but squared. Twice the length in some cases, maybe even twice the power or more of course, and twice or more times the size. Articulated steam locomotives are locomotives with 2 or more sets of driving wheels. In most cases, articulateds are considered malays, which are basically the same thing. The rear set of the driving wheels are fixed to the locomotive's main frame with an articulated truck carrying the second set of drivers, while compounding in which the high-pressure cylinders drove the axles on the main frame and the articulated axles were driven by low-pressure steam. Many railroads experimented with articulateds as far back as the early 1900s. The most famous examples in North America are of course Union Pacific's Big Boy 4014 and Challenger 3985, Norfolk and Western No. 1218, and more recently, Western Maryland 1309. However, most of the railroads that had articulateds, well, they never lasted very long, as in some cases they weren't very popular. Some were simply just mad science experiments. If you read the title of this video, we're talking about the Pennsy once again. Don't worry, I have other ideas in mind. I just really hope Rodney doesn't see this video. But yes, you probably did know that the Pennsy of all railroads had articulateds as well. First, what is the Pennsy? The Pennsylvania Railroad was a major American railroad that loved competing with everyone in any market they could possibly get on. This of course included power. I've made a previous video about an experimental electric locomotive that failed because of its sheer power and its poor implementation, so if you want to go watch that, it'll be the first link in the description. Anyway, the Pennsy actually had a couple of articulated steamer types, like their Double H series to 882s, but there lived another type that was only built with driving wheels. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of the Pennsy Railroad's CC-2 class. When it comes to building steam locomotives, they have to have at least 1 or 2 types of wheels, but it depends on what it'll be used for. The 3 types of wheels are pilot wheels, which are placed at the very front of the steam locomotive, which can help the locomotive turn better, driving wheels, which are the biggest of the 3 and help drive the locomotive, and the trailer wheels placed at the very back of the locomotive, which can help with stability and in some cases boost the locomotive's overall power output. Sometimes, some locomotives can have 2 sets of driving wheels, which could help a crap ton with the power output as said earlier. In the 1900s, locomotive manufacturers were really experimenting with how much power they could put on one locomotive, rather than constantly needing 2 for certain jobs. With the Pennsy, their first real take at this was their experimental CC-1 class steam locomotive built by Baldwin. With one ever built in 1912, it was put on yard work strangely enough. It had an 0880 wheel arrangement, which means it had no pilots, no trailers, and 16 driving wheels in total. Since it was a testbed for its next experiment, it didn't last very long and was scrapped by 1932. Just 7 years after the CC-1 prototype was built, the PRR built the next generation in 1919 called the CC-2. It had the same 0880 wheel arrangement. Upwards of 10 of these beasts were built, also by Baldwin. This time, the CC-2s were put on more than just switching things. They were put on transfer jobs and hump yard work in Columbus, Ohio. They were also tons more powerful than the experimental predecessor. Uniquely enough, unlike most steam on the Pennsylvania, the CC-2s were built with radial stay fireboxes rather than the typical bell pair firebox boilers. As with other compound engines, steam was first fed into the rear cylinders and then forced into the larger low-pressure cylinders up the front. The massive front cylinders on the CC-2s were positioned unusually high, which ensured adequate track clearance when the locomotives were in operation. The CC-2s overall were proven to be extremely successful, becoming one of the Pensy's best-known articulated engines. While most of the PRR's articulateds were scrapped before the 1940s, the CC-2s lasted significantly longer than any other articulated locomotive on the railroad, being fully withdrawn by 1949. Unfortunately, all were scrapped and none were preserved. The reason PRR scrapped them a little early is that they never really found a use for articulated and compound locomotives like the CC-2s, as they were being replaced mostly by standard locomotives when it came to yard work. The CC-2s were also very slow and weren't suited for road jobs on the main line, which is why they weren't really used outside of Columbus's massive rail yard. Though malays and compound articulateds were never really a big chapter in the Pensy's history, it's still cool that they existed as a new thing that's been tried out in the 20th century. There are quite a few articulated engines preserved today. One of them even holds the title for the world's largest active steam locomotive. Even though none of them were really owned by the Pennsy, they're still a sight to behold across America. Thanks a lot for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. If you have any thoughts, you can leave them in the comments. Have a great day.